What's up, fam? It is opening day eve for 28 teams. Obviously, we had the Yankees game tonight. Pretty bad beat down of the Giants, 7-0. But obviously, before the season gets started, we can get a nice predictions coming in. Sort of looking at all divisions, sort of where we see fitting for the year. Obviously, a lot of the sort of national media kind of pushed a lot of their predictions out there, but obviously, this is just sort of hopefully some biases aside, sort of some fun way to sort of just get ready for the season coming in. So obviously I think we'll start in the National League, where I think things are going to be a little bit more competitive this year. Starting in the West, I think everyone kind of knows where this division is going to go. I think obviously the Dodgers, the rich get richer. Getting Kyle Tucker this offseason definitely deepens the lineup that was already very, very deep. So obviously I feel like they should probably run away with that division. Obviously, I think San Diego is going to be breathing down their back rather heavy. I think they're going to be a safe two. They probably will be a wild card team. Their pitching staff kind of scares me in San Diego. I think that lineup, there's no questions really about that lineup, but I think looking at that staff, seeing what happens with some of their starters coming off of injury, if we kind of get that sort of staff that we saw prior to injury, I wouldn't be surprised if they do give the Dodgers a little run for their money, but this is 100% the Dodgers to lose. After that, seeing the Giants tonight cheating a little bit, I don't. If Logan Webb, their top starter, isn't looking really particularly good in Game 1, obviously it's a long season, tons of starts to go. That's something that could potentially be worrisome. I kind of pencil them at the 4th, Diamondbacks at 3. I really like what they did with their rotation over the offseason. Obviously bring back Merrill Kelly, bringing back Zach Gallen. I think that rotation is going to be a lot better than what we saw last year. And I think that lineup is just kind of consistent. It's not going to be a star-studded lineup, but you're going to kind of get that consistency from top to bottom there. So I think they're a safe sort of third team there. And then obviously I think everyone, just like you can pencil probably the Dodgers top of the division, you can pencil the Rockies at the bottom. Pretty terrible team. I don't think there's going to be many bright spots there. I think self-explanatory there, and sort of the outlook for the Rockies. It's going to be another tough season for them. But a division that is probably a little bit more intriguing in terms of depth, and depth in quotations is not necessarily depth of star teams or good teams. It's more depth of just sort of those average to slightly above average teams, which is no more than the NL Central. Honestly, this division is really hard to read in my opinion. I think obviously you had the Brewers winning it last year, with the Cubs having a sort of strong start and sort of falling apart towards the end, and obviously having a good postseason run. I don't see the Brewers doing it again. I think they sort of caught lightning in a bottle. I just don't see that happening 2 years in a row. I think they have great approach to the plate. Pitching is what they need. I think losing Freddie is going to be big. I'm curious to see sort of how the rest of the rotation stacks out. So I think just with the kind of uncertainty of the Brewers, I'm penciling the Cubs as the division winner. I think with the addition of Bregman and a bit others, sort of Showtime coming back as well, I think they didn't really lose much, and they added a lot. I know they subtracted Kyle Tucker, but I think obviously having Bregman kind of stable bat in that lineup to sort of even mentor some of the younger hitters along, I think is going to be very beneficial for them. So I think the Cubs kind of will run away with this. Brewers, I think, are a safe probably 2 seed. I think even with all the certainty previously mentioned, I think that's a team that you can pretty reliably think that they will be that sort of number 2 team to sort of challenge the Cubs. I don't see anybody after the 2 seed after the Cubs making the playoffs. I just don't think these teams are strong enough compared to the rest of the NL. At 3, I think the Reds. I think this is the one team that if they sort of make that push, I really like the squad. I really like the moves they made. I think their pitching staff is very under the radar. I think the only thing to sort of look out here is, again, a lot of their lineup is kind of unproven. Sort of no really sort of star status there. So it'll be interesting to see how the Reds sort of push in. 4, I pencil in the Pirates. I think their offseason was great. I really do. I think they made a lot of good, smart moves for the lineup, but I think that lineup is not there for me. I don't think they're going to be nearly as bad as they were last year in terms of production, but I do think that the Pirates pitching staff, obviously Skeens, they need a couple of their sort of secondary starters to kind of pop through this year. If they do, then this is another story again. I think them and the Reds are in the same story where I wouldn't be surprised coming into the season they're pushing for a wild card, and I think more for the Reds pushing for the division. But I put the Pirates at 4, Cardinals 5. I don't. It's gonna be a bad year for them. Tough. I mean, great baseball town, great baseball city. This is just not gonna be it. I mean, they did pretty much a hard sell this offseason. I think you're gonna sort of see that product on the field. I think they're gonna be an easy 5th seed. I don't think they're gonna be anywhere close to as bad as Rockies, but I think that they will probably be towards the top 5 and towards the lottery come the end of the season. I think that's a safe bet for them. So the Central again, just recapping: Cubs, Brewers, Reds, Pirates, and Cardinals. So that's what I kind of expect there. The East, honestly, this division is, in my opinion, the biggest cluster of all every year. I don't really like what most of the teams did, with the exception of the Mets. Obviously, I think the Mets kind of did what they needed to do to sort of be that sort of all financial team, but again, I don't think that really pushed them in terms of being the division favorite. Again, every day I feel like I go back and forth with the East. I think, in my opinion, until you top the top, you don't there. So I'm penciling the Phillies. I like Sanchez. I like Wheeler. Nola looked good in the World Baseball Classic. Obviously, small sample size, but the pieces are there. Even if you keep going down the line, you sort of still have that sort of depth and starting, especially if Painter is the real deal. The Phillies pitching obviously will probably challenge for being one of the best rotations in baseball. The lineup scares me a little bit. I think obviously Harper, you have all the usuals. Harper, Schwarber. I mean, I struggle relying on a power hitter who can sort of dangle himself around that 200 batting average line. I know batting average is an antiquated stat, but still, he's a scary hitter in the sense that when he's cold, and when he's hot, he's one of the best hitters in baseball. But you just never know what you get. So the lineup does question me there, but I still think that the pitching does really make them a safe pick for the favorite to win this division. That's who I kind of have. 2-3. I'm selling the Braves a little bit. I'm concerned about their pitching. Obviously, come the deadline, they're always the team that just stockpiles random relievers, so I think that might help them. But I still think that the Mets, they did what they needed to make the playoffs. Again, I don't think it's enough to win the division of the Phillies, but still, I think the Mets have enough weapons to sort of solidify themselves in sort of the NL picture. I do see them being the second sort of best team in the East. I also see them being a wildcard team. I think that the Mets starting rotation was vastly improved, which was a huge weakness last year. I think the lineup, I think losing Pete's going to be a little bit of an issue for the Mets. I think obviously power is going to be something that they're going to really need, but I think, long story short, I think that pitching rotation might actually be the savior this year, whereas last year was their downfall. Braves, again, hard to get a read. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't think the pitching kind of scares me in the sense of I don't really know what they have in the sense of, yeah, you have Sale. After that, what are you getting? That's kind of the question. Same thing with the bullpen. I know they have some solid pieces there, but you really have to question the pitching. No one is questioning this lineup. I think the Braves lineup is probably the best in this division. Maybe the Mets, obviously with the acquisition of Bichette this offseason, I think the Mets, push that, but I think the Braves still have the lineup edge in this division, but I just think that the question marks with the pitching really worries me. I still do think that this is a wildcard team. And then obviously, I have actually the Nationals at 4. I like their sort of youth. I think we are going to see a better Dylan Cruz this year. And then obviously James Wood, still sort of the stud that I think he's going to be. I think that team, I mean, they're not going to be anything world-beating, but I think that they're going to be one of those pesky teams that aren't going to be an easy win when you see them on schedule, but you should beat them, but they won't present as easy as possible. Lastly, the Marlins. Again, these are one of these teams where they're just every year. I mean, it's sad to say, but you can pencil them in. It's pretty bad. I'm interested to see sort of what Sandy can do this year. I think we're going to see a much better version of Sandy this year than we have in the past. But I think that's pretty much going to be the bright spot there. Obviously, Kyle Stowers being hurt for the first couple of weeks is going to make some of the star power and why you would want to watch the Marlins as an outside fan kind of sad. But like I said, I think the two pieces you're going to want to watch with the Marlins are Sandy and Kyle Stowers. But like I said, Stowers is out for a little bit. So again, NL East, I have the Phillies, the Mets, the Braves, and the Nationals, and the Marlins. The overall picture in the NL, I think for the end of the season, you have Dodgers in the West, the Cubs in the Central. In the East, you have the Phillies, and I think your three wildcard teams in order. I think it's going to be the Mets, Padres, and Braves. Like I said, I think those three wildcard teams are pretty safe, and I think for the Reds and the Pirates to crack that, that's going to be a little bit tough, and even the Brewers. Again, I'm fading the Brewers very hard this year. I'm not really buying sort of what they're selling, but obviously hoping I can be proved wrong sort of there. But yeah, that's the NL. So like I said, and obviously after we get through the AL, sort of do the sort of playoff prediction, but sort of keeping on brand with the West, this is where I'm going to have to sort of watch my bias a little bit. But with that being said, I do think if you look at the West last year, there was one team that was set the major league record for injuries, and that was Houston. Houston, for most of the season, was leading the division. They were ahead for a very long time, and eventually just the injury bug caught them. And this is where, as a fan of the Astros, I have to be cognizant. They are very aged. The first base, second, obviously, was Walker, Altuve. Concerns around Walker, what are you going to get? You're going to get the second half Walker or the first half. If you get the second half, this team might be going. If you get the Altuve that's hitting for contact, that's exactly what Houston needs. So that's the question what you see there. I think there's a lot of questions in Houston's outfield. That worries me a little bit, but I still think looking at sort of how the two seasons happened and strictly then taking a piece of the additions, I think this is Houston's division. I think Seattle, it took, like I said, very injury-filled season for Houston to lose division, and I don't see that injury happening again. And I also like Houston's offseason better than Seattle's. I really like Seattle's acquisition of Brendan Donovan. I think he's going to be a very solid piece, but they also are losing Suarez, who, to be fair, didn't really do much down the stretch for them, and they also lost Polanco, who was one of their sort of clutch guys that every time he comes up, and the game's on the line, that's a guy you want on your team, and with him going to the Mets, I think that's a big loss for the Mariners. I think what a lot of people I've noticed in the national media are kind of very much undercutting Houston. Houston has a history of making starters better. And I think we've seen already Mike Burrows, who they acquired from Pittsburgh, just kind of lighting up everything. I think he could be one of those guys who could step into what Hunter Brown did last year. I don't think Cy Young, but I think he could step into that role where you see him move into that sort of second role, sort of not ace level, but elite tier, where you can sort of see that make that step with sort of what you've seen so far in spring training. I like the acquisition of Tatsuyama Imai. I think that was a good pickup there. Obviously, I think you lose Fromber, but I think a lot of people say, oh, you lose Fromber, you lose an ace. Yeah, Fromber, if you look at 22, 23, yeah, you had an ace. I think 24, 25, we saw a completely different guy. I think, frankly speaking, I just think he's hunting a bag, and he got the bag, and I wasn't blown away by him. So I do have Houston winning. Like I said, I do have questions in their outfield. I think this team goes as far as the lineup allows them. I think the pitching staff is going to be one of the more underrated staffs in baseball. I do have Seattle in the 2 seed. Again, my sort of issue here is you're not going to get a 60 homer season from Big Dumper. I don't see it. I think you're going to see him regress a lot to the mean, to sort of that 330 homer hitter, 240, 260. Again, I'm not going to say one hit wonder, but I'm not buying sort of. He's improved to me. I would love to see him do 60 homers again, give Judge a run for the money for MVP, but I don't think you're getting that. And then honestly, Julio, I think, is one of the most overrated players in baseball. I think, yeah, he is, in my opinion, a good equivalent George Springer. He's not going to blow your socks off. He's going to be a very above average outfielder, but he's not the MVP candidate that I think a lot of people are saying. I think his ceiling is that, but I think we need to see more consistent basis on his aspect. Pitching for the Mariners is always going to be nasty. Their bullpen's disgusting. I think their bullpen in this division is by far the best. Starting rotation, last year, they were hit or miss. I think they're coming in with a lot of swagger this year, the Mariners rotation, and I think a lot of it is they need to kind of show it again. I think they need to show what they did in 24. Because 25 wasn't. I mean, it was still a good year, but I don't think it was anything world beating. Um, it would be interesting to sort of see how that lineup is. I think they needed to make a lot of acquisitions for that lineup, and they didn't. Obviously, like I said, Donovan's big acquisition. I don't think that necessarily pushes them over the lineup. I think this will be a close division fight, but I think Houston has sort of the pieces more equipped to do so than Seattle. And again, main argument here being Houston was leading the division all year. Injuries plagued them. And I think Houston had a better offseason. So that's kind of my sort of logic there. So I have Houston, Seattle. Honestly, I like the Athletics as the third best team. That lineup in that sort of AAA park is going to be explosive. You're going to see, obviously, Nick Kurtz. You're going to see Soderstrom. You're going to see even DeVry at a certain point sort of come up and just hit absolute nukes. The only question I have, and I think Texas and the A's have sort of the inverse. I think the A's lineup is going to be probably one of the better ones in the division. I also think the Rangers pitching staff is probably going to be one of the best in baseball. With that being said, Texas needed to address their lineup. They didn't. Nimmo, I think sort of how that lineup goes is if Nimmo's what he used to be, I think then, yeah, I think that Texas team might push Seattle and Houston, but I don't really see them particularly pushing too much of a challenge short of for those sort of top spots. And I just, the Athletics are just one of those scrappy teams that you kind of just don't want to bet against. So, like I said, I really like the lineup, the Athletics. Pitching staff, like I said, really scary. But, I mean, it's the reverse with the Rangers, where lineup, are they going to be the stagnant lineup that they were last year? Obviously, Seager healthy. Probably should improve it there, but the lineup there is big question marks. The bullpen's also a huge question mark. That starting rotation is going to be nasty, which honestly may make me want to invert these, but Athletics 3, Rangers 4, Angels are going to be terrible. Fifth team, Mike Trout needs to leave this team at the deadline, hopefully find a contender. Obviously, loyalty is loyalty, but Mike Trout, if he wants a chance to win the championship, it's getting off this team as soon as possible. I do like some of their starters. Their starters are going to be interesting to watch this year. Outside of that, there's not going to be many bright spots. Zach Neto, obviously great shortstop, but again, not nothing that's going to world beat, nothing that's really going to challenge for the top. So again, AL West, Astros, Mariners, Athletics, Rangers, and Angels. So then going to the Central, which in my opinion, I'm very pessimistic on this division every year. I think this is the most boring division in baseball every year. I do think this year we're going to see some interesting sort of trends here. Detroit, I think really needed to address their lineup, and they didn't. Yeah, it's great that they brought the JV reunion back. That's great. Questions about him being able to finish games, go deep in games. Is he really going to sort of transition more to sort of that long reliever, which I don't think he would be open to, but I just don't see him being the sort of guy that you can rely on to go 5 innings every 5 days. But again, outside of that, I mean, that rotation, Skubal, you even have all the young guys, Mize, Job, and getting Fromber. I mean, the pieces are there in the rotation, the bullpen with AJ. I mean, chaos bullpen. He's going to manage that pretty damn well. Again, those games are going to be like 1-0, no offense. Again, I just they know what they need to address. I know they obviously have McGonagall as their sort of rookie of the year guy that I think a lot of the national guys are sort of picking for the rookie, but I just don't really see that lineup really producing a lot. I still think they win the division. I think it's sort of a very runaway division. I think it's what should have happened last year, but didn't. But like I said, they're really going to go as far as their pitching allows. If their pitching is mediocre, this team could finish second to third. But I think, like I said, this team goes as far as their pitching. It was a story last year. It was a story in 24. I think that's really what's going to happen with Detroit. They're 1. Royals 2. I think the Royals have a lot of good starters that I think are going to be fun to watch. Obviously, you got Cole Reagans, who I think could make a serious push for Cy Young, and that's not a crazy hot take. I think a lot of people out there have that coming out, but I think that lineup too, a bunch of young guys coming up, of course, Miguel Garcia, Bobby Witt, Pasquash. I think you have a lot of sort of upside here, and I'm kind of buying it. I think if there's going to be a year for the Royals to sort of make that sort of push for the Central, it's going to be this year. I do think that they could push the Tigers. I don't think they have the pitching to do it. I think the bullpen for the Royals is a little bit shaky. Obviously, I know they did a lot of sort of acquisitions even during the deadline or early in 25. Like I said, I really question the pitching outside of their sort of starting pitching, which I do think is going to be a strength, but I think down the stretch you're going to sort of see the Royals probably fall back. 3, I have the Guardians. Honestly, I feel like putting them 3 is probably a super disrespectful thing to do. I think this is a team that very easily could be winning this division. You just have no idea. They're like the Tampa Bay Rays. You just, every year, they really have these guys that come out of nowhere. Obviously, the offense going to be that sort of pesky, annoying, slap the ball everywhere, and then obviously J-Ram, you know what you're getting there every year. Starting pitching in general, a question here. What are you going to kind of get with them? Obviously, you've lost 2 guys, which I think was pretty well known prior to the season to sort of the gambling accusations, and obviously with Class A, one of the best closers out, and Luis Ortiz, who I don't really think would play anyway. There's sort of things that just question whether they play sort of the overall team throughout the year. But again, I think this lineup is just going to be sort of that. This is a team I'm not going to write off, but they're going to be that sort of pesky team that kind of annoys the rest of the teams in the division. So I think they're a very safe 3 team. I think 4. I think this is going to be a shocking thing to say, but I'm going to actually put the White Sox at 4. Their offseason was very impressive. I think they got a lot of pieces to sort of supplement their young core, and I do think that we're going to start to see a lot of that young core pop through. Obviously, with the White Sox, not really the best managed team and sort of the analytics, stuff like that, so questions about that. But again, this is a team that's young, scrappy. I wouldn't be surprised if they are get out of the cell or sort of push for that 4 seed. Like I said, I think the White Sox are a much better team. Their offseason was much better than the Twins. And I think the Twins obviously are going in opposite directions. I think the Twins obviously looking for that sell coming up very shortly. So I wouldn't be surprised if again Joe Ryan barely makes the deadline. I wouldn't be shocked if he's traded prior to the deadline. So obviously we'll see how that comes for that division. So again, in the Central, Tigers, Royals, Guardians, and then White Sox, Twins. Like I said, I think White Sox are actually be pretty fun to watch. They're not going to be as miserable as they were last year, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how the small pieces sort of impact that division. Like the NL, I think the AL East, you really don't know what you're going to get. Obviously, we have 1 game sample size for the Yanks. This is a team that I'm very sort of perplexed on. I don't really know how I feel. Obviously, I think that lineup's going to put up a lot of runs. But again, what are you going to get from Garrett Cole when he comes back? Max Fried, you're going to kind of get that top of the rotation guy. Again, I think this is a team that should win the division. I think that the Red Sox honestly have a better staff. Again, I think both these teams, the bullpens are where I think is going to determine this division, and I'm kind of leaning more Boston. I think Boston sort of has positioned themselves to have a way better starting rotation. Obviously with Crochet, again, Cy Young candidate every year. I think you have Crochet at the top. You bring in Sonny Gray, you bring in Ranger Suarez, who if he makes the playoffs, that guy's a demon in the playoffs. You bring in a guy like Ranger. I mean, he's your 3. I think I just saw that they sent Bello down to AAA, and that's a guy who starts for most teams. So it's interesting to see. Like I said, I think Boston takes this division. I think the one sort of caveat I would put with that is, what is that lineup going to produce? Just seeing one of their spring training games live the other day, Duran, beast. I mean, having a lot of left-handers is sort of the piece that you sort of just key. I think if you have a good lefty, I think there's a pretty good chance you're going to neutralize that lineup. Obviously, losing Bregman, I think you lose that sort of contact leadership role. I think Roman Anthony's a stud, Duran's a stud. I mean, after that, it's kind of where it becomes kind of questions on sort of what kind of player you're going to get. But I think, like I said, I think Boston takes. And then New York, like I said, that lineup's good. Obviously, Judge getting a Golden Sombrero on the first day is joy to my eyes. But like I said, I think this team is definitely going to be pushing with Boston for the division on this one come late September. Third, I think, is pretty safely the Blue Jays. The issue with this division is I think all teams made a lot of good moves. Toronto, I think, is a good case of catching lightning in a bottle, and they rode it to the World Series. They're in the category of the Brewers just not buying a second year of it, losing Bichette, the lineup. You have a lot of sort of role players, so I mean, again, if they ride lightning in the bottle for the year, this is a different story, but we'll see. And obviously, they're dealing with a lot of injuries right off the bat. I think 3 of their 7 potential depth in the rotation's gone to injury. So I think you're not going to see that sort of Toronto team that was in the World Series. I think you're going to sort of see a team that sort of pushes wild card aspirations for this division. And I think that's the same case for the Orioles. Again, the Orioles need one thing, and they need starting pitcher, and everybody's known that. I think obviously acquiring a guy like Shane Baz is a great trade, but again, he is a sort of unproven commodity. I think that line, and before I even get to the lineup, I just think that you need to add a proven commodity. Framber Valdez made a good sense here. Even though I don't value Framber as an upside first sort of top of the rotation starter anymore, I value more that middle. Baltimore needs that. They just need starters, period. That bullpen, if you get a healthy Felix Bautista and Cano setting him up, you're looking good in games, but the issue is they don't have many starters that are going to give you 7 to be able to hand that ball off to Cano and Bautista, and the depth in the bullpen isn't there for me. The lineup is question marks. What Adley you're going to get, what Gunnar you're going to get. Obviously, Gunnar with a fully healthy season. You kind of saw what he did in World Baseball Classic. I wouldn't be surprised if he regresses back to that sort of MVP potential. But again, I have a lot of question marks in this lineup, which is what sort of has been touted as their strength all along. Obviously, they have Holiday on the IL, Westberg on the IL. So they're going to be starting off with a very young infield and outfield, frankly. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how that happens. Again, wild card in the sense of if you get production out of these guys in the outfield, sort of these young guys coming out, then this is a different story. But again, the issue with the O's, and it's been the issue for the last 3 years, is where's the pitching. They just don't have the pitching to, I think, to compete with the teams above them. The Rays, and the fact that the Rays are the 5th team is just crazy. But obviously, I think it's going to be an interesting year for the Rays. I think we're going to probably see this be one of their selling years where they're going to be, I think all these teams are going to be probably above or close to 500. But I think this is one where we see sort of Tampa's probably sell and be a seller deadline. There's sort of, I always sort of worry about saying they're going to be at the bottom of the division because it's the Rays. They always kind of find that sort of prospect or this player here and there that sort of will get them there. But I don't see that this year. I think this is going to be very much a rebuilding year. And I sort of position them at 5. So again, division, Sox, Yanks, Blue Jays, O's, and then Rays. Wrapping up the American League there, I think, like I said, the division leader, I think in order, I think it's going to be the Red Sox as the 1 seed, the 2 seed being Houston, 3 seed Detroit, the wild cards being mostly down the east, so I think it's going to be the Yankees and the Blue Jays with the Mariners somewhere in there. I think the teams to watch on the bubble, you're going to be the A's, the O's, and the Royals. And again, I wouldn't be surprised, again, if the Cleveland catches that lightning in a bottle, somehow makes it in. So I know I just named half the league there, but I think, like I said, the key sort of on the bubble, A's, O's, and the Royals. I think those are the 3 teams to look outside, and that should be sort of that. In terms of the playoffs, with the byes, I would have the Tigers beating the Mariners. I think the Mariners will be the 6th seed, just based on how good the AL East will be. I have the Blue Jays losing to the Yanks. So you're 2-3. So then I have the Yanks visiting Houston, and I have the Sox, the Tigers visiting the Sox. I have Sox Astros. Sox make it to the World Series. I think the one thing that I really like about their acquisitions is they got guys who are good in the postseason. Sonny Gray, if you look at his stats, pretty decent in the postseason. And you also look at Ranger Suarez. I think there's no better pitcher in baseball that you would want in the postseason than Ranger Suarez. He's done it over time, and that's kind of why you bring him in, is he brings that longevity. So I think, and as much as this pains me to say, I think it's the Sox in 6. I think that's a series where Houston's definitely not the favorite. I think they walk in, and it's kind of a dogfight. I think it would be fun to watch Crochet, Hunter Brown. As when I get to my awards, you're going to sort of see where I think they're there. But obviously, like I said, Sox going there. In the NL, looking at, again, you had Dodgers as the 1, the Phillies as the 2, 3 being the Cubs, and the wild cards being the Mets as the 4, Braves as the 5, and the Padres as the 6. 6 versus Cubs, that's Cubs beating the Padres, in my opinion. Actually, changing this live, I think I'm changing my mind. Padres over Cubs. I'm going to have them sort of upsetting there, and then obviously you're going to have the battle of the AL East wild card, Mets, Braves. I'm going to have the Mets. That should be a pretty, I think, quick. Obviously with Chris Sale, if the Mets were able to, or if any team on the Mets gets the game against Chris Sale, I think that series is done. So obviously the 2-3, that it would be again another NL East series with the Phillies and the Mets. I think the Phillies, again, I really like their starting pitching. I think starting pitching wins you in the playoffs. I think you're going to sort of see the Phillies push over and pretty easily beat the Mets again. Like I said, I think the Mets improve their starting rotation. The lineup is much, obviously, I think lineup's going to be much better than the Phillies. The pitching outside the top guys in the Mets worries me. And in a quick postseason series, especially getting into the bullpen, Devin Williams is not Edwin Diaz. I don't think you're going to get the sort of production you did if you had Edwin, so I think Philly takes that one pretty easy. And I think we are long overdue for a Dodgers horrible first-round exit. So I know I changed my prediction on the Padres-Cubs. I'm taking the Padres over the Dodgers here, mainly because I'm predicting just the Dodgers to go out first round. We haven't had one of their folds in a long time. I think this is the year where it happens. I think 2 back-to-back World Series. I think the fatigue starts to set in, and I sort of see that quick exit from the Padres. I think this is going to be a Phillies-Padres NLCS, and I think the Phillies are the team. Again, I really like that rotation. And then I think in the World Series, which for me would be kind of a nightmare, obviously being around the Philly area and not really enjoying Philly fans, and as well going to school up in Boston, this is probably one of the worst matchups I could probably see. But I just looking at it right now, I just think that these are the Phillies. Obviously, if the Dodgers fumble, the Phillies are the next best team there. So I think we're going to see that. This is where I think the lineups for both teams aren't really necessarily anything world-beating. They're good. They're above average, but I don't think there's anything too crazy. So I think this is where we sort of see, I think, a great one of those ultimate pitching fall classics where we just see pitching dominate. But I do have the Sox winning. Like I said, I call it whatever team Ranger Suarez is in. I'm picking him. I think he's going to be the X factor if the Sox make the playoffs. Like I said, this is way too early. Can't wait to be completely wrong on my predictions, but ultimately, looking at the season, I that is my picks throughout the division. Sort of the awards, going very quickly on the awards. MVP in the American League, I think. I mean, again, cheating, just overreacting off one game. I think Judge doesn't repeat. I think we're going to see some probably interesting players. Obviously, you heard me talk about the Royals. I think Bobby Witt is going to be up there. I also sort of see, I think this is going to be one where we sort of see a couple come out of the blue. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a J-Ram kind of resurgence to sort of even coming in sort of third in the division still, because that production is still there. You never sort of see that. And I would imagine Judge is there. I'm not going to overreact as much as I want to, but I think Judge will still be there so long as he's healthy. Vladdy is another guy I'm sort of looking at. If Vladdy can sort of do what he does and carry this team, then this is a different discussion. And I think Toronto, obviously, will I'll have to sort of relook over Toronto. If Vladdy is sort of producing what he did with the year he was the year of the MVP season. So ultimately, I have Bobby Witt as my MVP. I think he will bring a lot of production. I think the reason why the Royals do well this season will be because of him. I think ultimately he is the reason why they could sneak into a wildcard spot. I also think his production is just there. I think his power, speed, fielding, I I think if there's going to be a guy that's going to do it, I think he's a pretty safe bet. AL MVP NL MVP. This is a lame award now. I think it just goes to Shohei if he does both. I just my issue with Shohei is it's amazing that he does both, but he does both. Well, he does one adequate average, and the other he does above average. I think his hitting, he's what you advertise, he's very elite there. His pitching, I don't know, and I have an issue in the past of where they've given it to him, and it wasn't necessarily he was great or elite at both. He was just above average on both, and that got him the MVP. And I'm not necessarily there, but I think a lot of the writers in the media really, and obviously the glaze that the MLB kind of gives him, picking anyone but him is kind of stupid. It's lame on my part, but I'm not going to bet against that. I see how the MLB works, and honestly, if he just does both, he's going to get it. Cy Youngs, I'm picking Hunter Brown in the American League. I think that's a guy who got robbed of the runner-up last year. I think Crochet was great. I don't think he had a better season than Hunter. I think Hunter's the Cy Young. Skubal doing it 3 years in a row would be very impressive. Tip of my cap. I just don't necessarily see it happening. So I'm just like Judge. The AL MVP, I'm not going to pitch Judge 3 years ago. I'm not picking Skubal 3 years ago. I think it's going to be Hunter. I think it's going to be probably the same group of three. I can see Cole Reagans making it in there. If you had to ask me my predictions of 1 through 3, Brown, Reagans, Crochet in that order. Crochet, again, if they do the whole thing where they start benching him mid-season to sort of rest him and get to start, I think that's something that should be more sort of noted. But again, I think anyone in those four is a pretty good chance to sort of take home that award. NL, Skeens, it's the same thing with the NL MVP. Paul Skeens, he's the guy to lose it. Obviously, guys like Yamamoto, Wheeler, Sanchez of Philly, there's a lot of good options. I think if you're looking for a depth play, I think in terms of betting, I think Sanchez is a good depth play. I don't think anyone's touching Skeens. He's obviously the best pitcher in the world right now, and I don't think there's any questions about that. So I think Skeens pretty safe. Cy Young. Again, if you want value, I don't really think you can get much value at Yamamoto, but him, Crystal Sanchez is sort of my value pick there. But other than that, Rookie of the Year, giving predictions is useless because you never know who's going to get called up midseason. In the American League, obviously you have Detroit's McGonagall shortstop. You have Tatsuyama Imai from the Astros. If I had to lean anyway, if Imai is just a fraction of a 3 ERA guy, he's probably going to win the Rookie of the Year. And the NL, honestly, that's one where it's like if Connor Griffin comes up, I'm a believer in him. I think he's going to be sort of the real deal. It'll be interesting to sort of see what he gives. But that would kind of be my pick there. Again, Rookie of the Year is a crapshoot. There's always a guy that comes up in like June or May who's just kind of nasty and just runs away. Obviously, you have all the top prospects out there, but that's kind of just my early sort of picks. So obviously, just wrapping up. Hopefully, everybody's team gets their sort of game tomorrow. They don't have any rain delays. I think there are 3 that actually don't play tomorrow. I think there's 3 games that start Thursday. Obviously from here, you're never going to get a debate. I think opening day should be a national holiday. It's America's pastime. Hopefully everybody can enjoy their team playing. Hopefully every team except the Angels starts off with a win. Hopefully everybody can enjoy the fact that we have baseball back, and sort of with baseball being back, it means the nice weather, summer's coming about. So this will be a wraps on the first video. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll hopefully do some lives coming up. But like I said, good sort of start to sort of prep baseball season. All right, thanks everybody. Cheers.